Hi everyone, I just wanted to film this intro to this video because I actually filmed the book recommendations video quite a few weeks ago now, and since then the murder of George Floyd has kind of shaken the world and the Black Lives Matter movement has sort of come to the forefront of everyone's attention, and I think a lot of white people have been prompted to actively educate themselves further about the issue of racism. And so I wanted to firstly say that I think it's really important to amplify Black people's experiences and listen to them and use any sort of education that they've already put out there to educate ourselves. And so I really want to share some resources that I've been using to educate myself on the issue of racism, and to urge you to also use these resources and share these resources and find any other resources you can to educate yourself as well, and to get a better understanding of how you can actually take action against racism and become an active ally to Black people. So the first book is one that you've probably seen a lot of people recommending at the moment. The reason I got it was actually from other people's recommendations, and so I think it's really important to keep recommending it, and it's called Why I'm No Longer Talking to White People About Race. I haven't had this book long, but I've nearly finished the first chapter, which is about the sort of history of racism in the UK and how the UK was involved in the slave trade and events that occurred after the abolition of slavery. And so this is really important for understanding the background of racism. Obviously I can't comment on the rest of the book because I haven't read it yet, but already it's just like opening my eyes a lot and I'm learning a lot from it, so I'd really recommend giving it a read. And further to that, I've also sort of simultaneously been reading Me and White Supremacy, and this is basically for white people, and it prompts you to kind of take a look at yourself and take a look at the society you're living in, and it basically takes you on this sort of 28-day journey. It's kind of structured as like day 1, day 2. On each day you're kind of introduced to a particular topic, and then you are kind of prompted to do some reflective journaling about it. And so I've just been doing the journaling now, and I think this kind of like holding up a mirror to yourself and to society is really important, and I think this book is going to be very eye-opening. So again, I definitely recommend this. As well as these books, I've also been using a document that was produced by 2 women, and it's on their Instagrams, which I will link below, and basically it's called Justice in June, and it is a big document that has so many resources for you to use, and again it's kind of split into different days. So the idea is that you do one thing a day for the whole of June, things that take as little as 10 minutes a day up to kind of doing things that will take like more like 45 minutes. This includes like reading articles, watching TED Talks, listening to podcasts, and it has loads of links and ideas of different actions that you can sort of take to help the Black Lives Matter movement. And I feel like this book and the Justice in June document are really good for people who just don't really know where to start, because it gives you a very structured list of things that you need to do each day. So if you want to educate yourself but you're kind of struggling to find things to use, then both those and the other book I mentioned are a really good place to start. I know this is technically a book recommendations video, but I also just wanted to mention some things that you can watch on TV. So I recently watched the BBC drama about the Windrush scandal. So it was called Sitting in Limbo, and it was a really good true story about the events that occurred. I also watched When They See Us on Netflix, which is a mini-series, and again it's a true story and it's very hard-hitting, but it's sort of like the blunt truth about systemic racism, and so again a really important watch. And finally I also watched the film Queen and Slim. This wasn't a true story, but again it presents to you the issue of racism and is really hard-hitting. Please do check out all of those resources that I've mentioned. I will leave links below in the description, and obviously comment and share any other resources that you've been using that you've been finding helpful, and let's all just keep educating ourselves, because that education is what is going to help to bring about change. I'll now leave you with the rest of my book recommendations. Enjoy the video. Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today's video is going to be my 10 book recommendations for you while you're in lockdown, because I don't know if you're like me and you found that you now have a little bit more free time to do those things like reading that you've just like always put off. And I used to absolutely love reading, and I've always read growing up, and recently I just sort of stopped reading. I just sort of lost the habit. I used to read every night before bed, but now that lockdown's here, I've definitely got back into it again, and I was getting back into it actually when I was starting my placement, because it was a really nice way to wind down in the evenings. So yeah, I'm gonna just get started straight away with my recommendations for you. There are going to be more than 10 books actually recommended in this video, but I've kind of tried to split things into genres and authors, hopefully to kind of suit everyone's tastes a little bit. So my first recommendation for you, this is a particular author that I am just obsessed with, and I always have been, and very underrated I think by young people in sort of modern times. So I'm talking about Agatha Christie, and I have quite a few of her books here. There are actually more downstairs in our bookcase. There's a few that I haven't read, and I think there's actually more that I have read, but I've just picked out a selection that I can kind of remember reading sort of quite recently. So yeah, can you tell that I actually love her a little bit? If you don't know who Agatha Christie is, well, she's basically, I think, like the biggest selling author of all time. All of her books are murder mysteries, and I absolutely love murder mysteries. Basically, the way that I judge a really good book is something that hooks me, and so that when I'm not reading it, I'm still kind of thinking about the characters and I'm still thinking about the plot, and I just want to keep picking up the book, and I just really want to get to the end because it's that kind of exciting. And so for me, having really good sort of suspense and having a mystery as the plot is something that really makes me just read a lot. So Agatha Christie, I can guarantee you every single one of her books, you will be putting it down and you'll be thinking, oh, I really want to know who the murderer is, and then you'll pick it up again and you just won't be able to stop reading it, and until you find out the murderer, which is always at the very last chapter, you'll just be like, you just want to know who it is. And every single time, I mean, there's been like a couple that I've guessed, but other than that, I'd say Agatha Christie is so good at like plot twists. You think you know who the murderer is, and then she just comes out with this twist and you're like, ah, I would never have seen that coming. So yeah, any of Agatha Christie's books I would just recommend, just for a fun read. Try one. If you don't like them, then maybe stop reading them. But in particular, I would recommend And Then There Were None. This has been made into a drama, really great ending, and it's also good because it's there isn't a single detective in it. They're all kind of working together to work out who the murderer is, whereas most of them have either Miss Marple or Poirot as their detective, and Poirot is my absolute favourite. Like, I've read so many of the Poirot ones. I don't think I've even read Miss Marple ones very much. This is probably her best-selling one, and it is really quite amazing. Like, I think it kind of changed the way that murder mysteries were written and were... I can't say anything about it, but I just would really recommend it. It's got a really good plot and ending. Yeah, so that's The Murder of Roger Ackroyd. Death on the Nile is also a really good ending. And there's one more. I think it is Peril at End House, but I'm not entirely sure. I think this is the one that has a really good ending as well. So yeah, but basically any of them, just have a go. When I say good ending, I'm talking like a twist that you just could never imagine. Like, you won't guess the end. Like, maybe some people will, but I didn't. Yeah, I'm going to stop talking about Agatha Christie now and move on to the rest of my recommendations. Following on from what I've just said about Agatha Christie, if you are the kind of person that likes a murder mystery story and you want one that's set in sort of a more modern time period, then we have The Cuckoos Calling. This is another sort of detective mystery story. It was really good, and yeah, it's by Robert Galbraith. But actually this is by JK Rowling. If you don't know, then she kind of like used this name to sort of disguise her. But yeah, she wrote this after Harry Potter, and I think it's really good. So my next recommendation is another book that has a really good ending. I think there's a bit of a theme here. I obviously like a kind of plot twist or kind of a good ending, don't I? But that is this book, We Were Liars. I read this a long time ago, so I can't remember all the ins and outs of the plot, but I remember enjoying the plot as I went. Again, it is a mystery book, sorry. I am going to get to different genres, I promise. But yeah, a really good ending, and it's also really easy to read. You know, one of those books that's just like, it's just effortless reading, like you don't have to really think about it. It's also very short, so if you're not into reading long books, then this one's for you. Yeah, it's by E. Lockhart. If you know who John Green is, he was the author of The Fault in Our Stars. He says that this is thrilling, beautiful and blisteringly smart. It is utterly unforgettable. So definitely give that one a go. Next on my list is again another book with a really, really good ending. And it is this book, and it's called Elephant Elephant. It's called Eleanor Elephant is Completely Fine by Gail Honeyman. Again, very easy to read, really sort of lovely storytelling, good characters, good ending. Definitely a recommendation from me. The next book I want to talk about is The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime. So we actually did this in school. I think we did it in like year 9. This is the story of a boy with Asperger's syndrome who's just kind of navigating his way in what he sees as a very sort of confusing world. It's a really good book and it's been made into a play. I don't know if it's still at the West End. Obviously no one can go see it at the moment because of lockdown, but yeah, I'd recommend seeing it as well as a show because it was really good. Yeah, I just really like this because I think it's one of those books where the author really kind of understood and portrayed really well the difficulties of living with autism, and I think it's really important actually that people read books like this and understand how other people's minds work and how other people just sort of think very differently to maybe you would. And so I think as well as being just a really enjoyable read, it's actually quite informative to sort of see an insight into what a person with Asperger's mind might kind of be like. Okay, so I couldn't possibly film this video without talking about some kind of medicine book. But don't worry, it's not going to be a textbook or anything. This Is Going to Hurt by Adam Kay. He now does like shows where you can go and watch him. Like, he's really funny. This is a really good book for so many reasons. It's extremely funny, so if you like humour, this one's for you. It's basically a diary of an obs-and-gynae doctor, and there are some really interesting cases that you get to read about. And it also has a really good message at the end. It's quite emotional actually. Towards the end, obviously it starts very jokey and like on the most part it is a sort of humorous book, but at the end it's quite sort of hard-hitting, and I think, yeah, it's really, again, like The Curious Incident, it's a good insight into the life of a doctor and what it's really like. So obviously all the highs and all the hilarious stories that you get to tell from it, but also the lows and the really emotional side of treating patients and trying to save lives. If you haven't read it already, then you really should. And he also has a Christmas book, 'Twas the Night Shift Before Christmas, which is just like a continuation. It's more funny stories, but it's also more really sad stories, and I think this one's actually more hard-hitting. Like, it gets more emotional. The types of stories are more difficult to read that he tells. So yeah, both of them, give them a go. And they're also very short and very easy to read. Like, it's not like a book, it's like reading someone's diary. Okay, so now if you're kind of a more analytical reader and you know you like to kind of really read and like think about the message behind things and think about what a book is trying to say about society, then I have some recommendations for you here. All of these books I did for English at GCSE and at AS level. I didn't take English to A level. They are To Kill a Mockingbird, Lord of the Flies and 1984. And if you've done English in the UK, then you've probably done at least one of these at some point. But if you haven't read them, I really would recommend them. They're not necessarily the most enjoyable read, but they're just really interesting, like really interesting topics. So 1984 is a dystopian novel about, well, it was originally about a future time period, but obviously it's now past at 1984, about what the world would be like if everything was very monitored and surveyed and someone was watching and controlling everything that you sort of did. Lord of the Flies is about a group of boys who end up on an island, and it's all about how they form their own society, how they elect a leader. Again, very interesting, and you can sort of draw a lot of parallels between the boys on the island and just sort of society and how groups of humans work, how political systems work, how political systems go wrong. So yeah, very interesting to sort of think deeply about. And To Kill a Mockingbird is about two children who are growing up in America in a time when black people had little rights compared to white people. Obviously an issue that is still present today. This is a really good look at that issue through child eyes. Okay, so my next recommendation, things that probably a lot of you have already read. Harry Potter is obviously like, do I even need to speak about it? You just have to read it. I don't care if you've seen all the films 100 times. The books are better. The books are always better. And fun story about this book, I actually got this the night that this book came out. So we went to Waterstones at midnight and queued up and got our book. Twilight. Now, people love Twilight or they hate it. And to be honest, I get why people wouldn't like it. I do get it. But give it a go. We're talking about books here that, yeah, you're not going to analyse them. They're not literature genius works or anything. They're just a bit of fun, they're just enjoyable, and especially if you've seen the films, I think it makes the book even easier to read because you don't even have to think about, oh, what's this character, how are they related or anything like that. I think these books are just nice, like, you know, read in the garden, just pick up every now and again, read a bit when you've got a spare minute. Also The Hunger Games, again, better than the films. If you haven't read them, you should read them. So next, we have The Body by Bill Bryson. If you want a bit of an educational read, then I would recommend something like this. Now, I haven't actually read this yet, but I've had a flick through and I know I'm going to love it, obviously because I do medicine and I love the human body, but I think something like this is really interesting for anyone to read because it's going to be in a language that you can understand, and I just think, why wouldn't you want to learn about the human body? Like, you're living in one, like, you might as well learn about it. And also, it actually features Nottingham Medical School and some of my lecturers and some of my, like, anatomy teachers, which is really cool, like, they get a mention in it. So yeah, I'm excited to read those bits. If you have any recommendations yourself, put them in the comments for other people to read. I obviously have a lot more books here, so I could have gone on and talked about more, but they were just kind of the ones that really stood out for me as being like recommendable books. Yeah, so remember to subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you very soon for my next video. Bye!